Hello Traceable Designers. Today we're making a super easy straight style lambrequin valance. We're going to be making an adjustment to turn it more into a cornice-style valance rather than the long-sided lambrequin. So we're going to be making shorter side panels, and the way we do that is we just adjust the design form when we're tracing the side panels. So we'll learn how to shorten those side panels for a more traditional look. We're also going to make a wider connector panel. Rather than a center panel with connector panels between, we're going to expand the center panel to be a very wide connector panel that velcros over the side panels. Pull out your straight style lambrequin design form sheet. You will have side panels or side panel design form and a center panel design form. The center panel design form is used to make both the connector panels and the center panels with the rod pocket. We're making a wide connector panel with Velcro. So cut along the dark line to remove the sections. Make sure to cut the little edge off of the center panel design form. And then we'll move on to sizing our fabric section. For the side panels, you will have an unlined rod hanging pocket. So we need to make sure that we position the design form over our fabric print to capture whatever layout you prefer. And remember, we're also going to shorten the side panels, so that extra section in the middle will be raised a bit. So we're tracing the design form with the printed side facing up to make the right side panel. Then we will be reversing the design form to create the left side panel. So we're making these separately. It's way too much fabric to try to do them both at one time with a folded fabric section. So again, I'm repositioning my design form. You will be making about a 2-inch wide pocket. So it's going to be 3 inches to 4 inches you will need above your design form for the unlined fabric section. And so you want to make sure that you've got a nice straight form across the top, then simply place marks across the top of the design form. That will indicate the placement for your fusible backing for adding your lining to the back of your side panel. Pull out your Heat and Bond Alter Hold fusible fabric backing from your kit, and we're making sections. We're doing the top section first, so we're aligning that across the top of our design form where our marks were positioned, and then we'll cut a second piece for the bottom. You want to make sure you stay within the edges. You don't want to fuse onto your ironing board. You will deposit glue, so you make sure you have a little margin on the inside there. Then just remove your design form, and then you'll position your Heat and Bond again across the lines with the knobby side facing down, paper side facing up, leaving a margin. And then we're going to use a dry iron, no steam, to fuse this down. So make sure you're nice and straight across your marks for your rod pocket section. Turn off the steam and use a medium-high heat with a dry iron. Use a sweeping motion across the top and then down the middle and out toward the sides. This will always help to avoid buckling. Once that's completely secured or fused down, you'll put your second piece of fusible backing that will overlap, and that will cover the length of your fabric section. That covers the lower part of the design form. So we'll iron that down. And then I recommend taking your design form back out again and positioning it over top of your Heat and Bond. The reason for this is you need to make sure that the area below your design form is 100% covered with the backing. If you're missing any paper there, you will have a gap and it won't secure your lining properly. So in this case, I ran a little short, so I'm doing a second piece on the bottom area there, and I'm just going to fuse that down, making sure everything is overlapped. Double check on the left and the right side to make sure you're positioned properly, then just fuse that in place. Now to remove your paper, you'll start with the top paper first and then move to the next paper and so on. Now when you do have an overlap, you will have a little bit of a pull from the paper when it's removed. So you want to make sure that you don't pull off the glue. So you'll peel that back carefully, and then when you get to the part where the two pieces were attached where they overlap, then you'll just carefully pull the paper at the corner to make sure that that comes off clean without pulling off your glue. Then of course follow the exact same process for the upper section. So once your paper is removed, cut a piece of lining that will extend past all edges with quite a bit of a margin. I recommend about 2 inches to 3 inches margin, because as you move down your panel, this can shift a little bit and you want to make sure that all the glue is covered once it's fused in place. So you'll align your lining across the top edge of your exposed glue, nice and straight below where your rod pocket section will be. Then beginning in the center across the top, you'll just anchor that fabric across the lining across your fabric, and then we always use a sweeping motion center out. Now, since you do have a pretty long piece of fabric, you should throw it over your ironing board, and then you'll just pull it almost like a large sheet across your ironing board as you continue to fuse. So you'll see here that I have quite a bit of margin around the outside edges. This can shift a little bit as you are fusing, so you really want to make sure that all of the glue is covered by the lining as you progress. Then just flip the fabric over and run an iron across the front side of the fabric. You want to make sure to remove any buckles, again sweeping from the center out in case there is any buckling so that you can straighten that out. Once everything's nice and smooth, turn your fabric upside down with the lining side facing out and position your design form across the top edge of the lining. Make sure that you are covering all of the glue on both sides, on the inside section as well as along the straight long edge. You want to make sure that that is attached to the lining, so double check, and then once that is positioned properly, then we'll begin tracing underneath the design form and then down around the bottom. Since we are shortening this panel, we will be removing 3 inches from the adjustment section in the center. So we'll begin on the underneath section of the design form for tracing. So I'm marking off my upper width section first, then tracing the underneath upper section, and then ending at my adjustment marker. Make a little mark so you know where to raise your design form. Raise your design form up, keeping it aligned with the straight line, and then just finish tracing underneath the design form and around to the lower curved area. Then to trace the outer long edge, you'll make sure that your design form is straight across the inner straight line where you adjusted the length so that that's nice and straight, and then you'll just trace the outer edge, then pull the design form over to the left, and then trace across the upper section, the outer edge of the design form, to adjust the width of the upper section for the panel. And there's no need to trace across the top of the design form because we've already sized a very straight rod pocket. So now just follow the trace line carefully around your fabric section, maneuvering it as needed to get the shape cut out. And then when you're finished with that, you'll repeat the entire process using the design form, tracing it upside down in order to do the left side panel to finish both side panels. To hang your side panels, you will use a no-sew rod hanging pocket, so fold the fabric section over. This is the unlined section, and meet the top edge of the lining, leaving a little space there. Then we'll use heat and bond across that folded section on the unlined section, making sure you stay inside of the edges. You don't want to overlap onto the lining or onto your ironing board. Just peel off the cooled paper to expose the glue, then pull the pocket taunt over top of your lining and take your time to fuse down your rod pocket. You have a couple of layers of fabric here, so that may take a little longer to get that to completely adhere. And you'll have your adjusted side panel with your rod hanging pocket. For our center panel, we're going to make an adjustment to the center panel design form to create a Velcro-on connector panel. This panel will hang between the side panels. So typically you would have a center panel with a rod hanging pocket and a connector between the two pieces. In this case, we're going to add 4 inches of height to the panel, and we're going to add Velcro to make an extra wide Velcro-on connector panel. For my connector panel, I'm using a piece of fabric that's about 19 inches deep by about 35 inches wide. I'm making a 31-inch wide connector, and I'm going to need the extra depth at about 15 inches, so I'm good with this size. So I'm just flipping it over and ironing out any wrinkles. You want to make sure you get rid of those before you begin and before you add your fusible backing. The fusible backing is 17 inches deep, or wide actually, so it will cover across sort of the middle of this piece of fabric, and I'm going to try to capture where I'd like the design form to fall to grab the flower centered in the center. So again, starting in the center with a sweeping motion out toward the side, attach your fusible backing. Once that's cooled, peel that paper off and hang on to this piece of paper. You're going to use that to protect your ironing board or your table when you're adding the trim to the edge of all the panels. So put that aside. Then cut a nice big piece of lining. This should cover the entire piece of fabric around all the edges and leave a nice big margin. Again, as you're ironing this down, you're going sweeping motion center out, throw it across your ironing board, and then just keep feeding it along until you've completely fused the lining to the back of the fabric section. Then turn that fabric section over and really make sure you check for all buckling from the sweeping from the center out. That's always the best way to do it, because you will push any bubbles or any buckling out toward the side as you progress. Once that's completely adhered, we'll move on to tracing the form. Since my fabric has a centered flower, I'm going to fold my fabric section in half to make sure that flower falls right in the middle, and then pin the fabric so that it does not move for tracing. If you do have a directional print, make sure that it is positioned properly. I'm going to add width to this center connector. So since I'm making a 31-inch wide center connector, I'm going to mark from the left side, which is my folded fabric edge, over 15.5 inches to mark 50% of the width of this panel. So you'll start at the bottom and you'll mark up to the top, so that when you position your design form, you will align it along those right marks to indicate the proper width. When you position your center panel design form, make sure it's falling below where any print that you might want to capture, and then align it on the right side along those marks. Trace along the right side, and then under the design form, once you finish the under section, then carefully slide the design form over to meet the folded edge, and then connect the line along the bottom over to the folded edge to mark the full width of the panel. To add length to my panel, I'm adding 4 inches, so I'm starting with my lower mark and measuring up 15 inches and marking my fabric on the top to mark the top line. Then reposition the design form along the right markings and across that height marker. Trace across the top of the design form, then again slide it over to the folded edge, making sure it's nice and straight, and finish tracing off the height of your connector panel. To cut out your connector panel, put the folded edge facing you, and then just follow the trace line all the way around the fabric section and across the top, because you don't have a rod hanging pocket, and then open your connector panel. Okay, moving on to edge trim. I'm using a 3/8 inch braided gimp trim, and I'm using a cold tube glue, which is Unique Stitch. It does dry clear. You can use any kind of glue, a glue gun or the iron-on method. So I'm putting a thin strip of glue along the edge, and then I'm carrying on around the bottom curved section. And then when you attach your trim, pull it taut, one long piece, and just sort of place it down on top of the glue for the side, leaving about an inch above. And then when you're going around your curved edges, make sure you bend that trim really well, so you really follow the shape of the valance panel. And then again across the lower section, pull it straight again, and then up the side. And then before the glue dries, make sure you do a double check to make sure it's perfectly balanced and even at the curved section on both sides, and then just secure the trim behind the panel. Then just follow the same process for both side panels, making sure you really follow the curved edges, and then use one long strip of trim along the wall sides, and then just secure that underneath at the lower edge and then behind on the rod pockets. Okay, the final step is to secure the fasteners to the connector panel. So you'll need to fold that over and make sure they're positioned properly. You will be using 3, at least for this 31-inch wide panel. I'm measuring over my folded section exactly where I'd like it to fall, and that's where I'll determine the placement of my fasteners. So I'm using 3 of them. I'm making sure they're spaced out, and I want them to be spaced inside of where it'll actually fold over the panel. So I've got 1 centered and then 2 on the outer edges. Those will be secured using strips of fusible backing. So you need to deposit the glue from the backing onto the back of the panel in order to hold the sticky back Velcro in place long term. So once I get my vertical strips in place, I need to do the horizontal strips. Those don't need to be really wide. They just need to be able to fold over and connect. So I'm cutting fusible backing to match and line up, and then I'm ironing that across the top of the panel. So then pull out your package of Velcro. You have the hard side and the soft side included in your kit, and then you'll cut matching pieces to cover the exposed glue. So you either use the hard or soft side on the vertical and then reverse it, or use the opposite for the horizontal. Then just remove the paper from the cooled backing and the paper from the back of your Velcro pieces, and then just position those right over top of the glue and stick them right on. Then just slip your side panels on a 1-inch metal curtain rod and slide them up against the wall. Then secure your connector panel between your side panels and attach the Velcro in the back. Thank you for joining me, Traceable Designers, and remember, you can always make your mark with Traceable Designer.